let's move on to our next topic, our second to last topic. And this has been right before the pandemic was the biggest story that was going on in the country. And that was the environment. There was a lot of talks about the Green New Deal and the Democratic primaries. Some people praised it, some people opposed it. However, there might be agreement between the two candidates on this one that they are not a fan of the Green New Deal. So, Mr. Federman, would you present Biden's plan for the environment and infrastructure as well?
Sure. One of the things that Vice President Biden wants to do with the money that he's going to raise by increasing taxes on the wealthy is to spend it to try and get us on a path to net zero emissions by 2050, a much more realistic timeline than the Green New Deal, which I believe wanted to do it in 10 years, 2030. That would simply be too disruptive to the economy. He wants to, we start with the basic assumption. The science is fairly clear. Climate change is happening. The world is hotter than it's ever been, and it keeps getting hotter. We see the excessive weather that we've seen go on, and it's going to get worse. He wants to install 500,000 electrical vehicle charging stations nationwide by 2030. He wants to spend on infrastructure, which means things like bridges, roads, internet access in rural areas, upwards of $2 trillion over 10 years. So we're talking about a couple of $100 billion, $200 billion per year to promote all kinds of renewable energy, things like windmills and solar panels. This will create thousands and thousands of high-paying green energy jobs. He's definitely looking at this as a win-win situation, asking the wealthier people to chip in a little more, spend it on what is clearly the future. And if we don't do it, if we don't invest heavily in renewable energy, our competitors overseas will. They will become more efficient in the long run. None other than Elon Musk. The reason why he decided to go into electric cars, he had an epiphany when he was in high school. He woke up one morning and said, we're going to run out of oil and gas one day. We have to start making electric cars. Okay. By making them more efficient, by figuring out ways to generate the electricity that you're going to put in those batteries, using wind and using solar and other renewable energies, we can clean up the economy and create a lot of high-paying green energy jobs.
Dr. Axelrod, how does Trump's plan compare to Biden's?
Okay, well, with respect to President Trump's plan, he also wants to see more infrastructure. But again, I think the approach is to have the private sector drive it more than the public sector. Again, the idea here is if it's driven by the private sector, the market will, communicate and reinforce what looks like what we really need as compared to, what people in Washington, D.C., think is important, okay? So that's one take of it. In terms of environmental issues, President Trump supports continuing the extraction and development of fossil fuels, okay? He's, rolling back some of the environment regulations that, they just seem to be too much. They're too picky. It's like, okay, you want to protect animals and such like that, but, humans are more important, okay? That's part of the take on it. And again, this is allowing the private sector to be able to take advantage of the resources that we have. And he also doesn't want the U.S. to be held back by agreements like, for example, the Paris climate agreements that, other countries may or may not follow, okay? We don't want to hurt our economy as a whole because of the fact that we're putting ourselves at a competitive disadvantage. And a lot of this is also driven by, yes, maybe the technology keeps advancing. And if it does, well, we'll have to adapt with it. But today, we need oil and gas. And so does the rest of the world. And as long as we need oil and gas now, we should be producing it. We should be the ones that are taking advantage of the resources that we have. So again, it's about, what do we need to deal with now as compared to what we're imagining is going to happen in the future.
So when it comes to environmental issues, would all three of us agree that Biden's plan focuses more on the environment and looking towards the future, whereas Trump's plan is focusing on the economy now, what we need right now?
I take a little issue with that because there's no question that we've generated thousands and thousands, I don't know the exact numbers, of jobs in renewable energy. So it's very much economy related as well. If you haven't heard of the Gigafactory, it's one of the largest buildings on planet Earth where Tesla is making their batteries. And you can look up the Gigafactory. And that's 100% green energy jobs, high paying jobs, right? Building windmills, building solar panels right here in this country. So yeah, I would say Biden's plan is more focused on environment, but very much will also be a benefit to the economy.
But wouldn't some of those jobs come from the fossil fuel industry as well?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the concerns that President Trump has, is if we try to push too quickly to go into this Green New Deal, what's going to happen? There'll be less consumption of coal, so there'll be fewer miner jobs. That's really going to impact people that have, not a very high standard of living. Okay, and what are their alternatives going to be? I mean, if you're talking about, for example, in West Virginia, that's a major part of their, their employment. Same thing with oil and gas. It is not an automatic that if they lose their jobs, they're immediately going to be finding jobs in the renewable sector.
There's going to be disruption. However, in 1890 to 1910, when the automobile started getting developed, there weren't people who said, "Oh no, if we keep developing the automobile, everybody in the horse and buggy industry will be put out of jobs." It's part of the natural evolution of technology. Anyway.
What it really comes down to is, what is the focus? Is it about the crises that are right in front of us? Or is it about this world that we're going to create for, 50 years or 100 years from now? And, what you're interested in is where we're going to be in 100 years. You might go a little bit more green. If it's about, how are we going to get through the next 6 months to a year, that's a luxury that some people will feel that we can't afford.
There's definitely concerns on both sides of the aisle, whether it's for the economy or for the environment in general.